For the next 2 years, Babe was home at our new house. Ray probably was there a good deal of the time to help her, but basically they took care of themselves and prepared their own meals since the kids couldn't eat at the hotel. And it was a busy time, both for me learning the new business at the hotel and for Babe taking care of two little children. Sheila seemed to be pretty grown up for her age. I mean, she was talking and walking and doing a lot of things. She was really remarkable. This continued until the children were 4 and 6 years old, and the next big thing that happened was that we decided to take a family vacation and go to Florida. And the way we were going was Eleanor would take our 2 kids and her son Joel, who was about 4 years old at the time, and fly to Florida. At the same time, Abe and Babe and I would take their station wagon and drive to Florida, taking 3 drivers and 1 person stretched out sleeping on the floor of the station wagon. It should seem would be an easy drive for us. And we had reserved rooms at a motel on the ocean at somewhere around 180th Street. Anyway, we got down there driving very, very easily. There was one small incident in the morning, early in the morning, before we got to Florida. We were a little tired and wanted to check into a motel to use the bathrooms and take a shower and stuff. And the clerk thought that we were coming in to shack up. There were 2 men and a girl, and he wondered why we only wanted to use the place for an hour. It sounded bad, but we explained, and he allowed us to use the facility for a short time. Anyway, we then had a few more hours to go and came to our motel, which we found was right on the beach and had a pool, and it was beautiful. And Eleanor was already there with the kids. And the children, our children and Joel were ecstatic about having a pool and the ocean, and it was a very happy occasion. We had thought we would spend a week there, and then Babe and I and Abe and Eleanor would take a separate vacation to the Caribbean. And Abe and Eleanor went to Haiti for a week, and Babe and I decided to go to Cuba it was a little cheaper, and we were going to take a boat overnight from Miami to Cuba and spend a week, and I think we arranged to fly back at the end of the week. We weren't leaving the children alone at the motel. They were fairly grown up, but not ready to be left alone. Eleanor had her mother come down, and she was going to stay at the motel with Joel, and my parents, Emma and Ben, were going to stay with our two kids for the week. The grandparents were looking forward to it, and the kids didn't mind as long as they still were on the ocean. Anyway, Babe and I drove down. We were driven down, I guess, to Miami, where which was not too far, just maybe 10 miles. We were on Miami Beach. It was just a little south of us, to get this boat that was going to take us to Cuba. And we got on, and we weren't too concerned. We were only going to be on it for one night, so we weren't too concerned about what the room was like. But we left in the afternoon, and before long we were out on the ocean and ready to go to dinner. In the meantime, the sea got very rough, and the boat was jumping all over. But Babe and I were not sick, and we were looking forward to dinner. However, we were in a minority because most of the people didn't even bother going into the dining room. And as we went in, we saw people all over the corridor sitting on benches and sofas and stuff, but they weren't thinking about eating. They were thinking about if they threw up, where would it go? Anyway, we went in, we had dinner, we came out, and it was almost like when we got out, it was a hospital situation. Almost all the people were nauseous or throwing up. And if they could, they got outside and threw up over the rail. If they didn't, there were puddles all over the place. We stayed up a little while. Oh, I remember now. They had an orchestra playing, and when we got in there, we saw the orchestra was seated on seats, but they had they were tied down to the seats with straps so that they wouldn't fall. The seat was not movable, and they had seat belts so they could stay on the seats, and they were playing manfully under the conditions, and we manfully got up and tried to dance. It was really a funny evening. Anyway, we stayed an hour, and our waiter asked if we would do him a favor and take a few cartons of cigarettes into Cuba for us, for him the next day. He would come to our stateroom, give us the cigarettes, and then when we got in, we were allowed to take in cigarettes for ourselves. Since we weren't smoking, we didn't mind doing that. So we arranged with the waiter to take his cigarettes into Cuba for him. I think we were allowed 2 cartons, and that was would mean that he could make about $5 on $2.50 each on each carton of cigarettes. That made his trip worthwhile. So we did that, and the next day we went to we had reservations in the best hotel in Havana, and we arranged to do some sightseeing during the day and to go to a nightclub called the Tropicana in the evening. The Tropicana had a floor show that was similar to what they had at Radio City Music Hall. Many, 20 or 30 hardly dressed women and dancing with male partners, and the headline on their show was a female singer, I think by the name of Night, and it was quite a good show. Besides which, being a nightclub, it was also a gambling spot. So it was like a Las Vegas hotel with a big show and a lot of gambling. I went into the casino, which I had heard was not too honest, so I didn't intend to gamble, but I wanted to see what it was like. And I was at the crap table, and standing next to me was another customer, I thought, and he asked me, was I going to gamble? He was thinking about it. And I said, well, I don't know. So he said, I'll tell you what, why don't we go partners? We'll each put up a certain amount, we'll be partners, and we can gamble. Well, I guess he was a shill, just trying to get me started, so I refused and stayed a few more minutes watching, and then Babe and I went to see the show, and after the show left and were looking for a cab to take us to our hotel, and we heard somebody say Katzman, and what it was a doorman calling to the Katzman party that their cab was ready. Now, we had left Abe Katzman in Florida, so it wasn't him, but it happened to be his brother and his brother's wife. I think his name was Ben Katzman. And we introduced ourselves and told them they were partners in a metal steel business in the Bronx, and had were both vacationing, but in different places. So that was kind of extraordinary coincidence. Anyway, we were back at our hotel, and we realized that we really didn't want to spend the whole week in Havana, in a city. And we had heard about a beach about 30 miles out. I think it was east of Havana, called the Valero Beach, and we decided to go there, and we heard that you could get there by bus for a very cheap rate. So we arranged to go to the bus terminal, get on the bus, and to go to Valero Beach, probably for $2 a person. And we took the trip, saw 30 miles of what Cuba was like, and arrived in the Valero Beach area and looked for a place to stay. I don't remember whether we had arranged anything in advance, but we ended up in a big home, which was like it had been an estate that was owned by a rum producing family, and they had given it up, and it was being used as a hotel. There were probably 20 bedrooms, but the main bedroom, that had been used by the owners, was available, and the rate was $14 a day per person with 3 meals. And we asked them about the meals, and they said, well, we have chefs there, and you just tell them what you want, and they'll prepare it. And we asked about whether they had steaks, whether they had shellfish. Anything you want, you get for the same $14. So we checked in, and we were going to spend, I think, 6 days there. And we were delighted. It was right on the beach, a nice balcony that you could walk out and look at the ocean. And the meals were fabulous. So we had felt like we had really lucked into something that was great, and we were enjoying ourselves. Babe walked into the master bathroom, and she saw something near the toilet that looked different to her. She didn't know what it was. She saw some buttons, and she looked down into the bowl, and she pressed the button, and the spray came up and hit her in the face. It was a bidet, and that was our first acquaintance with a bidet. And it was a big surprise, but no harm was done. We enjoyed ourselves at Valero Beach, walking around in the evening. We came to a record store, and we went in, and we heard Spanish-type music playing. Anyway, the girl in the store said that's a cha-cha record, and it's a very easy dance for us to learn. As a matter of fact, she could teach it to us right then and there. So she got into my arms, and we started to do this dance. She showed me how to do it. It seemed very simple. In those days, we were pretty good dancers, and new steps came easily. But so we continued for maybe 20, 30 minutes, and by the time she had finished with me and Babe, we both knew how to do the cha-cha. And that was the kind of time it was for us at the beach, where there were new things and fun things, and we were having a great time. We had especially enjoyed the swimming at the beach, and had probably spent an hour or two each day in the water. But one thing we hadn't done was to leave the green area, where the water had the color of a light green, and swim out further where the water had a blue color because it was deeper. So I asked Babe if she'd like to, on our last day, go out to the deep water, and she said sure. And we started to swim out, and I had gone maybe 10 or 15 yards, and I turned around to see how Babe was doing, and I saw 3 people standing on the beach with their hands raised over their heads and pointing forward, like towards the area where we were swimming to. And they indicated that there was something wrong there. So I pushed myself up out of the water as far as I could get and could see, and sure enough, about 20 or 30 yards ahead of me were a school of sharks patrolling back and forth sideways to the beach. Well, I got a little frightened, and I yelled to Babe and said, go back to the shore. And I started swimming as fast as I could. For one reason, I think, was that I thought I remembered that if showed you were alive and flailing, that the sharks wouldn't attack you. Be that as it may, in about 10 seconds, I was up to where Babe was, and she was so frightened at all this that she kind of stopped swimming, and I gave her a shove towards the beach and pushed her right out of the top of her bathing suit. And nevertheless, we continued swimming. We got back to the shore with the top off, but safe and sound. And were greeted warmly by the 3 people on the shore, who happened to be Venezuelans who had flown over to spend the weekend at this beach. And they were so ecstatic about our escape that they said, "Oh, let's go over to the bar. There's a little bar there, and let's get some rum to celebrate with." And rum at the bar was about $1.50 a bottle. So we each got a bottle and started to drink. And these three people said they were so happy. It would have spoiled their whole weekend if anything had happened to us. It might have done more to us than just spoil our weekend. We flew back to Miami, and it's only, I think, 90 miles, so it probably took less than an hour. And we were picked up by the family. I guess my father had his car there, and so he and my mother and Eleanor's mother were there to greet us, and the kids were there. So we had a big welcome, and the one surprise was that my mother didn't seem to have any teeth in her mouth. And that looked kind of strange. So she said, I have to explain to you what happened. And right there on the tarmac, she told us this story about having gone out in a glass-bottom boat with the kids because it was not a particularly nice sunny day. But it probably was a windy day, and when they got out in this glass-bottom boat, they started to get sick. And what happened first was that my mother didn't feel well and went to the side and threw up. Not only did she throw up, but her plates, top and bottom, went out with the what she was throwing up. So she ended up with no teeth and having relieved herself at least by throwing up. But in the meantime, my little, her elderly sister was there taking care of her and soothing her and getting her to lie down. And then she thought, I better do something about Eleanor's mother. This is what? I don't know. Anyway, she went to Eleanor's mother and she said to her, how do you feel? And she said, I don't feel so good. So she said to her, Nema reis the tzain, which means take out your teeth. So she just shook her off when she said that, and Esther, my aunt, said, Emma just threw up and her teeth came out. She had lost her teeth into the ocean. Nema reis the tzain, dein tzain, take out your teeth. And so Eleanor's mother pushed her aside and said, Ich hab mein eigenes Zähne. I have my own teeth. She couldn't take them out. So that was the end of that story, but there we were with my mother lacking teeth in her mouth, but Eleanor's mother okay, and my Aunt Esther, the oldest of the bunch, but the shortest, and evidently with the best balance, being okay. The end of that story is that my mother was able to get new teeth in a couple of days. I guess they have ready to wear teeth. I don't know how good they were, but they held her for a few days.